Good morning to all of you. My name is Civardi. I'm responsible for Maersk in Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar. Maersk is a transportation and logistic company at the same time, and we are trying our best to facilitate global trade.
I'm Gary Malcolm. I'm the managing partner for LHH Vietnam. We're part of the Adecco Group. I specialise in management consultancy and advisory for big multinational companies, and I'm also an executive coach for senior leaders in Vietnam.
Hi, my name is Warrick. I'm the Chairman and CEO of KPMG in Vietnam and Cambodia. We're a professional services organisation. We have offices in Hanoi, Da Nang, Saigon and over in Phnom Penh. We have 1,800 staff, 45 partners, and we provide audit, tax and advisory services across the sphere of needs of companies operating in our markets.
Yes, indeed, a very important question. So I think the first component is on the why, meaning that we want to make sure that our people feel part of an organization that has a very broader purpose. In case of Maersk, our purpose is to facilitate global trade, and that's the way we want to create positive impact on the world. Another element on the why, which we think is very important, is customer centricity. We want to make sure that our people find out great learning opportunity by being part of an organization which is absolutely in the journey to be focused more and more on our customer pain point of today and on our customer pain point of tomorrow.
Increasingly important is looking beyond the industry at the broader context in which business is operating. So we see, for example, geopolitics coming much more on the radar of CEOs and into the C-suite. Understanding what is the impact, for example, in Vietnam of the US-China trade war, and we've seen it really increase the focus on manufacturing in Vietnam and all sorts of follow-on impacts from something which doesn't directly impact the country in which we're operating in. We also have to think about the general performance of the economy. What's happening to wages and wage rates, what's happening with inflation, with GDP growth, and we can use that to set benchmarks. So in a firm like KPMG, for example, we consider growth anything less than 3 times the GDP rate of the economy as being below par.
There's a growing realisation in Vietnam that organisations have too many people. And as a CEO put it to me, is we're very fat organisations. And when they compare their organisations with a similar business unit around the region, we have a lot more people. We feel like we're very busy, but the productivity is not the same at the same level as we get in other organisations. So I think there's a real opportunity there for organisations to relook at how they're structured, have a look at how many people are in the organisation, review their processes, and see if they can get much more leaner and productive.
Another very important aspect for us to drive performance is on the what. Key word on the what is very much on the co-creating the ambition level. So getting away from the traditional process of top-down target setting or top-down medium-term business strategy. Forget about it. I think we believe that the era of command and control is gone. So what we're trying to do here is very much a bottom-up process of defining ourselves. What is the medium-term ambition? Where do we want to land in Vietnam? What do we want to be known for? And then own it really from within, and try our best, obviously, to execute it going forward.
One area that's really important, especially when we're working in uncertain business times as we are today, is that we don't neglect the fundamental process of business planning. And I think CEOs really need to be involved in this. We should start always by looking at the purpose of our organisation, what we're in business for. We should look at strategies to deliver on our purpose, and we should look at business plans to make sure that our budgets and our resource commitments and so on are aligned with those things. At KPMG in the last few years, I've been using design thinking tools to develop business plans and strategies, and I found it a really good way to turn around the thinking from our old way of looking at the resources we have to a much more customer or client-centric approach to how we design our business and our services.
How do we move forward on driving organizational performance? So we think there's a two aspect into this element. One is engagement. Engagement in Vietnam is particularly important to focus primarily on how people feel in the organization? Are we able to create a family atmosphere? Are we able to create a so-called home away from home, that our colleagues feel also part of the organization, which is almost a family for them, while obviously retaining the performance-driven approach that we want to have being a listed company in Europe. So engagement is absolutely one key element. Together with that, we try to focus on leadership. That means very much around empowerment, decentralization, entrepreneurship, coaching, which can all be summarized into servant leadership. The fact that we are here to serve our customer, we are here to serve our colleagues, we are here to serve our stakeholder.
So a common question that I'm being asked by CEOs, and in particular those business leaders that are leading medium-sized enterprises, is I have a limited budget for leadership development, so where am I going to get the best return on investment? So the answer to this question is not quite simple, and what I try to do is I try to help the business leader or the CEO understand their business a little bit better, and I ask them a number of questions to help them frame up the context. So a typical question that I might ask the organisation is, what's the best people strategy for your organisation in terms of development? Given your current people, where do you think your strongest bench strength is? Is it your senior executives? Is it your mid-level managers? Or is it your first-line managers? And typically that is where you put your largest investment, where you have your strongest bench strength. And another question that I might ask the CEO is, if you had to drive a really big change or transformation in your organisation, where do you think your engine is? Now, all the theory tells us it should be at the executive leadership team, but from my experience, it very rarely is.
So a really, really important part of running a business is just making sure the basics are done really, really well. This is kind of an operations focus, or looking for operational excellence as a way to ensure organisational performance. This is making sure that you've got a great finance function and that it's doing everything that it has to do, a great HR function, a good marketing team, a good IT system, those sorts of things that really just keep the wheels turning, and that if you're not doing right, things can go wrong really, really quickly. One thing that we've found is in high demand in Vietnam recently from clients is dashboard reporting. It's a way for managers and leaders to look at all of these systems across the company, and often data is produced by disconnected systems, and bring them together in a single site or a single page that is updated often in real time, often accessible mobile first, so that managers and leaders can see how the company's running, can see when things are going right, but really importantly can see when things are going wrong, so that they can intervene and get things back on track.
Well, I think the biggest challenge for organization in 2021 is the ability to cultivate the ability to unlearn and relearn, to cultivate the option to disrupt your own business model, and to be ready to embrace the new business model based on the challenges that the market poses in front of you. Easy to say, difficult to do. A lot of organizations have legacy of more than decades, practices and cultures that are difficult to change. However, we believe the environment is changing so fast that an enormous amount of agility and flexibility is needed, not only to cope for the challenges of today, but also to be relevant in the medium term.
I think the key question that every CEO or business leader needs to ask themselves today is, what have you changed as a result of changes in the external environment? If you think about 2019 versus 2020 versus 2021, these years are really, really different. Different external factors are driving all of our decision making as well. So what are we doing different today, and is it appropriate given the changed environment that we're in? Does it make sense? That, I think, is the most important thing we ought to be asking ourselves.
One of the key takeaways that I'd like to share is about leveraging your networks, and also building your networks. What I see happening in Vietnam with a lot of executives is you have issues that have been around for the last 15, 20 years. There's some organisations in Vietnam that are particularly successful or have had success with the issues that you're facing. So what I'd like to do is invite you to leverage those networks, find out what other organisations are doing, and learn from their failures and their successes with dealing with the issues that you're facing.
Now I'm from steel construction sector, and we have to grapple with the constant issues of unscrupulous competition in Vietnam, and that forces us to, on a continuous basis, to work on improving the efficiencies and drive the growth. And as a result of that, in the organization there are 4 things which are happening. One is there is always an issue of contradiction, conflict and confusion because of this. So I want to know what is your take on that. And the second thing is, right from the CEO level up to at least the manager level, we have to go through the transition all the time. So how to continuously monitor and manage this transition? These are the 2 questions I want to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, great questions, and I thought the video was very Hollywood style. We were really smart.
We should have rolled out a red carpet, I think.
That's right. We got a free A game up for that. Your question had a number of components to it, so I suspect Gary might want to talk about the transition and turnover and so on. So I'll just pick up the issue of unscrupulous competition that you mentioned in your opening comment, because I think that's a big challenge in Vietnam, and it's often a kind of an excuse or a reason that foreign companies might say that we can't compete because our local competitors are cutting corners or doing things differently to what we do, and we just can't do what they do, and it's it's really tough. I don't think there's any shortcut to solve that. I just think ultimately that playing at the top end of town and doing things the right way ultimately pay off. And if you look at the drive to build sustainable businesses and businesses that survive in the longer run, it's those businesses that do follow ethical practices, that have strong compliance cultures, that don't cut the corners, that ultimately survive in the longer run. And Vietnam is on a journey, of course, which is upwards, and ultimately sticking to your principles is going to stand you in best stead in the long run. And I think a number of us in different industries can point to our own ethics in business and say, this is why we're market leaders today, whereas over the years it's been much tougher. But it feels painful at the time when someone else is eating your lunch because they haven't done the hard work you've done or followed the same business practices you follow. I just don't think there's any shortcut there. Just pick up the other parts.
Just so I can understand the second part of your question a little bit more, you said that you've got a lot of turnover or transformation in your leadership or executive team. What's driving that?
So the turnover is driven by the projects coming to the region. For example, we are in a situation today in Vietnam where there is a huge growth in terms of logistics. So the projects are driven by that particular domain. The problem is, if we have to survive, we have to compete with those unscrupulous players, and the life cycle time of this kind of industry is not that long. What was just now said, that we have to continue to follow our ethics and this and that. The problem is, if we do not compete with them, we'll be out of the business in 2 or 3 years' time, because this is a very capital intensive plus labor intensive business. So the challenge here is, all this leads to a lot of contradiction within the organization and confusion and conflict within. How to handle that conflict is the key question. How to handle the contradiction and confusion amongst the team members is a great challenge for us. So I want that to be kind of addressed. Thank you.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying the unscrupulous behaviour is driving turnover in your leadership team.
Exactly.
Okay. So I can imagine then that the people that you're losing are people that want to play in that unscrupulous area.
So I'll give one example. We are quoting for a project, say for Alibaba, massive warehousing. Now there are some 10 suppliers who have been shortlisted for this. Now they will be given tender, and the price given by each of them will be very, very different. How people are able to quote 20% lower than us is a question that all the time bothers us, because there's no where we can have this kind of margin on a steel structure project. So the only answer is there is something which these guys are doing which is not right. And that's what I say, unscrupulous practices. For example, they are not paying to their people by paying full taxation, for example, all the benefits. So that means their labor cost is lower than ours. They are buying a lot of things in cash, and they're also getting funds which are cheaper than what we are getting if we follow the right method. So everywhere there is a difference, and that brings a lot of weight in the costing, in the pricing which we give to the. So obviously, if somebody doesn't follow those things, their prices will be lower, and we cannot compete. And if I do not compete for 2-3 years, I'll be out of the business.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Warrick's already talked to the point about, making that decision about whether your organisation is going to be willing to play in that area to compete with your competitors. If you've got people that do want to be unscrupulous, they want to pay the backhands or the bribes, you need to make a decision whether you're going to put up with that or not. I think a couple of other industries that I've seen that have had to deal with this in the past, and they dealt with it quite well, was the pharmaceutical industry. They had to make decisions about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was quite tightly regulated that if you played those games that you were going to lose your license here in Vietnam. So they made some pretty tough decisions around not paying backhanders. They lost a lot of people, but they're better for it now. I think the automotive industry is going through that at the moment as well, and having to deal with those issues. So for me, this is a leadership decision on whether you want your business to be unscrupulous or you want to play a clean game. And I think Warrick's already talked about the benefits of that.
Yeah, just a quick thought. So simple answer. So we choose not to do business if it is not 100% compliant. So we are not chasing growth for the sake of growth. We are chasing sustainable growth. And as long as the headquarter or the regional headquarter is aligned, we know which project we pick, which project we put consciously on the back burner on the sake of compliance. On the transition, I understand the question differently. That's why I want you to answer first, so I learn how to. I thought there was a little bit of misalignment within the team, and also how to capture all the moving parts in the economic landscape. So, quick comment on that. I think on the economic landscape, I know there's a lot of moving parts. It's hard to keep track, to be honest. So when we do strategy, we are creating a process called pre-mortem. So we hypothesize in advance the reason why the strategy is failing, and when we go backwards from there to try to mitigate issues. So this is one way to be a little bit proactive on anticipating what may happen. And also we have very frequent review of our business plan, at least a quarterly basis. That's another way to try to capture all the moving parts. And the second point that I captured from your question, which is of course one of the biggest elephant in the room, alignment within the team, especially when you have a very diversified team with different backgrounds and so forth. I believe we are going very much to embrace the notion sometime to agree to disagree. There's a team decision. Not everybody is supporting it, but once we make that call, we go ahead and move forward as one team without having somebody then in a few months later raise a hand. I told you this, I told you that, because it doesn't help much the organization.
Thank you. I would like to connect to Markus' question about learning and unlearning and open and maybe a less open mindset. And I have a 3-in-1 question. First one is, how do you recognize people with an open mindset? Is there something you would look into? Secondly, if you recognize a good performer but may not have a strong open mindset, how you deal with that one? And the third one is unlearning. What is ineffective experience from you, how you unlearn?
If I answer well the first one, can I skip the second two, or I need to?
It's like Nestle 3-in-1: coffee, sugar, milk.
So the unlearning experience for me, I think, is being part now of AP Moller Maersk, because the AP Moller Maersk of today is a new organization that's tried to do something that other company didn't do. So to merge the ocean hardcore transportation with the logistic services into one umbrella. Being here in itself allowed me to unlearn everything happened in the past and to join a startup within a big organization of 75,000 people and a long tradition and so forth. That forced me to unlearn everything and forced me to embrace the new and try to navigate within ambiguity and make the organization, help to make the organization successful. The second question, how to deal with a strong performer who is not open in mindset, not easy, but a good problem to have, because the person is performing. The real problem is when you have somebody who is not performing and is also not open in mindset. I don't have an answer top of my head, but I normally try to have these colleagues to change their mindset through reasoning and logic. I try to let them buy in rather than force them through something. The first one, I'm asking you to repeat it. Because
that's how you recognize quickly open versus
quick open. I want to quote Jeff Bezos because I learned from him that one of the criteria where he promotes people, among many, is if he's engaging people who are changing ideas. Because changing ideas implies a open-mindedness to learn through the data that maybe your beliefs were wrong. So to me, one of the signs of being open-minded is how much you are firmly believing in your thoughts to a point that you become blind, not even willing to listen, that the market is telling you something differently, that the data is telling you, but you still insist that this course of action is right and you want to go left because you always done that and pay back in the past. How agile you are to take your belief partially or fully in the parking lot and go with a new set of direction that the market and the data is telling you. So to me, that is one of the ways to see how open-minded you are, how agile you are, other than being completely, I would say, blinded of your past experience and so forth. And I try to practice it myself, meaning that I have certain belief, but I not overly force it until I really tick all the boxes on the market, the data, and external feedback and so on.
I was looking for a great interview question. What's an indicator which...
Warrick, did you have any thoughts on that?
The great interview question is a tough one. So I'll just speak from KPMG's perspective. So we have 1,800 people, as I said earlier. The good thing is that they are mostly 23 years old, and 23-year-olds come into a business with great ideas and passion and the sorts of things they learn at university and so on, and they're ready to change the world. The bad thing is that we tend to hire accountants, and accountants tend to be the opposite of all of those things, right? So we can, and you can, and probably you can run the test, is to measure agility across a workforce. There are tools available in the world of HR consulting, and we discovered when looking at our workforce that we have 1,800 almost very good technical experts. They're amazing at auditing or at taxation or at computer programming or whatever they're employed to do, but they're really bad at tipping out of their particular silos. So their agility is very, very low. And actually what I found most hopeful from a change leadership perspective was understanding that you're not going to change a lot of those people. Frankly, their agility is that there are certain elements of agility that you can change through management techniques and leadership and bringing everybody on board and so on and so forth, but you can't fundamentally change 100% of somebody's character. So you really, I think, need to build agility into your recruitment program to make sure you are bringing people into the organisation that are not so fixed, that do measure up differently, and then you need to make sure those people are properly challenged and they're given responsibility, and that you can achieve organisationally the level of agility and change without trying to change the individuals. Otherwise, what you discover, I know in my organisation, and probably a lot of you guys are the same, our workforce are expert passive resistors. Everybody agrees this is a good idea. Yes, it's an excellent idea, boss, and we'll go ahead with that. And then 6 months, 12 months later, what happened to that idea? And nothing has happened. you've really got to get over that. And it's, I think it's through often bringing in fresh blood, picking those people that do have agility, empowering them, moving them into the right roles, those sorts of things. It's a really tough one.
Do you want me to continue on that thing?
Up to you. If you
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just talk very quickly from a coach perspective. I think one of the most dangerous group of people that we have out there, and there's a lot of people out there, in particular in the executive teams, are the people who said they're open-minded, but actually they're not very open-minded at all. You can't shift those people. And if I get given a coaching assignment, that's one of the first things that I'm looking for. Who are the people that are saying, yes, I'm really open-minded, but when you dig in a little bit, they're not going to shift at all. So usually my recommendation for those people is, okay, are they a high performer? Can you put up with the fact that this person is never going to change? They're not open-minded to new ideas. Maybe you want to keep them. Okay, if they're not actually a high performer, they say they're open-minded, but they're not going to shift. Actually, you might want to exit those people. Okay, there's a lot of people out there like that, and unfortunately they sneak through the cracks, they get up into the executive team, and then they start to cause a little bit of damage in there because they don't allow the organisation to change or transform.
Quick one on an interview angle. What we ask all the time is because that's what the purpose of the question. We ask all the time to candidates, give us an example when you fail, and we want to make sure that the candidate show us the learning and the humility to say I could have done something different or not. And very often when we ask, give us an example of failure, silence, or they just tell you the task where they failed, but they don't embed the learning and the reflection. So that is maybe one sign that your view is a little bit short.
Good question, thank you. Next question, please. Ms. Long. Ms. Long.
Thank you. My question to Warrick. First is, what is design thinking tool? I'd like to know, and what does it help in terms of developing the organization or organizational performance? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So design thinking comes out of product design. So Apple is famous for it. You know, it's design thinking methodology to design the iPhone and iPod and what have you. But it's also given rise to a set of tools that can be used in management and leadership. And it is a way that you flip around the way that you think about your strategizing from your internal thinking to an external perspective. In the same way that Apple did when they redesigned the Sony Walkman to become the iPod, they flipped it around to customers and they said, what do customers want out of this product? And you can do the same sort of thing in your organization. And there are a number of tools that enable you to do it. So probably the easiest way is to think about a couple of examples of tools that you might use to design business strategy. A great one is the idea of subtraction. So if you think about an iPhone versus previous iterations of mobile phones, an iPhone today doesn't have a keypad on it. So they subtracted the keypad, yet they made the iPhone better in product design. How does it work in strategy design? Is to think about all the things your organization are doing, all of the processes in the provision of goods and services, and say, you know what processes or steps or elements could we remove in order to actually make our product better? So there are all sorts of examples of this. You think about, those of you in hospitality will know, in the hotel industry, that nowadays you can turn up to the Marriott in Hanoi and go straight to your room. Why? Because you've already checked in on your mobile phone app. What those people planning that business have done is subtracted the receptionist from the process of checking into a hotel room. It's it's something that you wouldn't actually imagine you could do in a hotel, is have a hotel without a reception, but actually you can. And in fact, some people prefer it, it's better. So subtraction is a really important tool, and just an example. Another one is alternate worlds, which I think is great. You think about business methods that are being applied in other industries and how they might apply to yours. So at our business planning, for example, at KPMG, we looked at how, I said before, we employ a lot of 23-year-olds. If you walk into Starbucks Reserve down the road, you will see a lot of 23-year-olds sitting at nice wooden tables, tapping away on their laptops, doing business or whatever they're doing. We looked at that world and said, you know what, perhaps we need to emulate that environment in our office. If you walk into our office today, you'll see an environment which looks a lot more like Starbucks Reserve than it looks like KPMG before. Big wooden tables, low lighting, places to plug in laptops, no fixed seats, agile work environment, those sorts of things. So we're stealing ideas from other industries and bringing them into our own business model. So you can do this in all sorts of think about great experiences on airlines or hotels and so on and so forth, and think about how you can reflect them in your business. So that's design thinking. There's a number of tools that you use. It's a process, and I think it can come out with a much better sort of a business plan and a strategy, much more client centric. It's led to us at KPMG launching an app, for example, called On Demand, where people can access KPMG expertise without having to try to log onto the website and go to our receptionist and those sorts of things. So that's what it's all about.
Thank you.
Answer that question.
Sam, you had your hand up? Yeah. And then we'll go to Ken.
You probably get close. Warrick, I was interested in your comments around business performance and dashboards. I think a lot of businesses here don't realise how their performance was until the end of the month, middle of the next month. Which industries, and if you wanted to talk about companies, do you see that are doing that the best?
Yeah, good one. I don't think people are doing it very well in Vietnam at all. We're discovering. I mean, a lot of the underlying IT systems are not up for it, and the data being collected is not good. There are some startup or newer entrants into retail and the consumer goods sector that are quite good now at capturing their data and using it in a way to measure SKU profitability or branch profitability or productivity or the sales return on particular classes of customer, those sorts of things. So retail is the area that is possibly where people are the most forward in it, and that's because there are new entrants, there are IT providers and solutions providers in the industry doing it. But even that sector is pretty awful. And you look at customer experience, we all know customer experience in a lot of Vietnamese retailers is not great. And the information, the reason is often they don't have the information that they need to make the right decisions. So we think this is an area where there's immense need. People talk about data and analytics. Some of the companies that are most proud of their data and analytics story are actually the worst at capturing the data, interpreting it in a digestible format, and acting on the responses. So it's an area which I think has got a real long road to run in Vietnam. And as I said, an area that we're working with a lot more companies on, starting with retail, moving into hospitality, healthcare, but also in manufacturing and other areas. You can do a lot with dashboard reporting. Very simple, but really powerful.
You might want to have a look at e-commerce as well. I think they're well and truly ahead of the game. I'm working with a couple of e-com companies. When they run their campaigns, they can actually predict the outcome of their campaign within about the first 3 hours of it. The data's so rich.
Okay, next question. Marco leaves in 10 minutes, so if you have a question. You good? Okay. Are you guys okay for an extra 10? Yeah. Okay, well, extra 10 minutes. It's going well. Ken, you're up.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying I'm a great believer in hiring for attitude and not for professional qualifications or whatever. I agree with most of what Warrick said, which is because we're accountants and we're not lawyers, because we get two lawyers that would agree on anything. But my question is that, yes, we have a very young, energetic and enthusiastic workforce, but I always draw the analogy with it's like you've got a Vietnamese Airlines flight attendant and she's been working in the cabin for 6 months and now she wants to fly the plane because they're always so ambitious. And how do you actually deal with that? And the other related question is that I found throughout my time in Vietnam that HR, or we call it people and culture, is very challenging because everybody, the majority of people that are involved in that side of the business view it as a compliance reporting function. rather than the soft function that we actually want in the organisation. And I have failed miserably in finding a top people and culture director or manager, and I could take somebody from one of the multinationals who was reputed to be one of the top 10 HR directors in Vietnam, and unfortunately that fell miserably. So, you know, how do you overcome that? Because you can't just bring in a foreigner, because the language is so critical to that function, and the cultural understanding of the people is so critical to that function.
I'll throw that to Michael.
Yeah, I think so. On the first point, the flight attendant flying the plane, I think there is a tendency to think that you are a bit better than what you really are, particularly in emerging market where you have a scarcity of talent, and you try to build as much as possible. Sometimes there's not much to buy, simply because the size of the market doesn't have. One of the key aspect that we try to coach our people in is that if you really think you're that brilliant, why don't you raise your hand to land jobs outside Vietnam and compete with the international workforce? We are very proud to say we have around 10 Vietnamese colleagues who are placed in international assignment. But once you raise your hand for international assignment, you know that you are competing with people with different nationality, with different skill set, and that is a checkpoint of how good you are in relation to other people that are competing with you for a particular role outside your hometown. That is one aspect that we try to implement. On the head of HR discussion, I think that topic is worth probably an hour in itself. Short version is that I think I probably interview 90%, or if not 80% of all the HR professionals in Vietnam. I think there's a lot of supply of talent of HR, but not many at the strategic level. But I think perseverance pay off. In the end, after a lengthy period of time, we find the person that is able to play the talent management agenda, the strategic agenda, and the engagement agenda on top of all the basics that need to be done. So, but I was very, very close to obviously have somebody coming from overseas. But we did not give up, and in the end we could find the right person, but it's certainly at least more than a year from when we started to think of the hiring, and then the moment that we concluded.
Gary, you touched on this in our interview, but I want to throw it to you next because you talked about this very specifically, the part that we didn't show.
Just to touch on the HR part, I think we all understand the issue. There's no formal HR training in Vietnam. There's probably about 10 very good strategic HR people in the whole of Vietnam, and they work for the big MNCs. There's been a number of attempts to run HR training in Vietnam, and they've largely failed. I know RMIT is running some programs at the moment to get formal HR training, so hopefully over time, and it's probably going to take 5 to 10 years, we'll start getting a good core of HR people in Vietnam. What particularly did you want me to talk about?
Maybe you don't remember, so I'll leave it. Mm-hmm. It was about sourcing talent, and you were talking about local talent and then sourcing talent from overseas, and seeing what's worth. Is it better to source talent externally or train someone internally, and the distinguishment between the two?
Okay, so slightly off. The point that I was raising in the video, there's a couple of things. One is with your executive teams, and I think Marco's already touched on that point, ensuring that you've got people that have had that overseas exposure. So once they come into the executive team, they can compete on the same level. I'm seeing a lot of organisations that are bringing people into their executive teams. They need to be able to have those discussions at regional, global level, but they've never had any regional or global exposure before, and those people largely fail. So if organisations aren't giving them that exposure, you're essentially setting the people up for failure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think on that, the issue of the HR directors is a big challenge for all sorts of organisations. I'm lucky I've got a fantastic HR leader in my business. So, but I think the council really is just to take that person that does have a compliance mindset and is an experienced compliance professional, and as long as they have the right mindset as an HR professional, make sure they're at the table, at the C-suite, make sure they're at the strategic planning meetings, make sure they are speaking to the regional leadership and are being challenged and tested, because the other thing we know about people in this country is they're immensely talented at learning and growing, but they need to be given the opportunity if they've come from a compliance team in HR and you're expecting them to be strategic. And no better way than to bring them to your table and make sure they're there. I think on the issue on expectations and younger people is something that we all have, and I just think there's a really heavy onus on us as business leaders and on our managers to spend a lot of time mentoring and showing our team or our individuals where they are performing to the standard that they think they are in a constructive way. And this is a challenge, I think, which is very different in the north of Vietnam and in the south. Cultural differences are strong, but I won't go into that yet.
Just a quick one, to be fair, I think a little bit for the Vietnamese talent pool. Many companies themselves are very immature in terms of HR. So if you don't have a strong culture within the firm, honestly, you're tolerating a certain quality of managers, and a lot of candidates are sharing to us that they are not pleased for many reasons. So how can you expect, if a company is not mature internally, then to produce a high caliber head of HR? So it really starts from the top. If you still start to think that HR is compliance or cost, you're not going to move the needle, and then you are accepting managers that are not living the talent agenda, and therefore all the rest.
Thank you very much. We had a question, John Paul, and then we'll go to Bob. Okay, John Paul. Okay, Julie, or you can just speak.
My question is still in the HR area. I'm sure you're all familiar with reverse psychology, and given the differences of cultures, how do you imply this into your organization?
Let's start. To be fair. Well, we have 8 different nationalities in the top 25 managers, so it's quite diverse, Maersk. I don't have a recipe for that. I just want to make sure that, at least to my inner circle, we try to focus very much on building your career strategically. That has an immense motivational factor. So you are seeing the role that you have now as a springboard to whatever next step will be. Is a well thought plan with timeline, stakeholders, and so on. It's not just easy talk up in the air. We believe this notion of building careers strategically, part of a diversified team, should unite all interests together, whether you're coming from India, from Italy, from China, or Thailand, or all the nationality that we have. So that's one on the career planning. The second one, I think, is the value of the company. Maersk has extremely, I would say, compelling values. One, which is very important, which I like, is called constant care, training your thought into managing today, preparing for tomorrow. Short, long term come at the same time. Sacrificing some profit today to make the company stronger tomorrow. I think is a fantastic way of working. So if we are able to tick the box on the career planning in a methodical way, and if we have values that you resonate with, I believe all nationalities can come to the same table. Obviously the question is challenging, and just some few thoughts.
No comment.
Well, I think you asked about reverse psychology, which I think is a bit, probably not a positive way to think about management techniques. In other words, trying to manipulate or trick out people. I really do think some leadership styles and management techniques are universal. I think being honest and transparent and respectful and so on to people is going to always yield effects. I think having a good understanding of the culture and the market that we're operating in is important as well. And we have 16 different nationalities, not to outdo you, if that's correct. But, yeah, twice. Yeah, but everybody comes in, and I see people bringing their cultural norms from wherever they come from. And we all know how terrible Americans work in Vietnam. That's a joke. But we know different cultures react differently here. But also understanding local culture is important, and particularly understanding, I think, the concept of face. It's pretty easy to understand. People not losing face or being embarrassed in front of their peers. This is something that is really important that we understand when we're working locally, and that we can use to our advantage when we understand it properly, because we can use that to get better outcomes, understanding it.
Thank you.
Maybe that.
Bob, do you have a question? And then we'll go to John.
Thank you. I see a lot of companies over the years, and I have a feeling that vision statements or mission statements are not clearly transferred to the workforce inside the organization. I would like to know from you guys how important is it and how can you implement it?
Gary, you got a big smile. So.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. The amount of organisations that I've worked with, and you talk to the CEO and you say, okay, what's your vision statement? What's your mission statement? Have you clearly communicated that down? Every CEO will say, yes, yes, yes. Everybody in my organisation knows what the vision and mission statement is. You then start working down through the organisation. By the time you get about halfway through the organisation, nobody knows what the vision or mission statement is, okay? So there's a complete disconnect between what's happening at the C-suite and what's happening down at the lower levels, and it usually stops at the mid-level management. The way that I've seen organisations who do have that good communication is things like the vision and mission statement are communicated as soon as they come out, and it's everywhere through the organisation. You walk through the office and it's clearly communicated down through the organisation. So it's communicated verbally and it's also communicated visually throughout the organisation.
I've found vision and mission statements far less useful than we all think they are. What has been far more useful has been purpose, thinking about the purpose of the organisation and then bringing that into everyday conversations. And we at KPMG, for example, inspiring confidence is a big part of our purpose. So if you can understand that inspiring confidence is your purpose, and you're an auditor, and an auditor that is out in an industrial zone doing grunt work at an inventory count or something like that, they may not feel very inspired. If they understand ultimately what they're doing is part of the process of inspiring confidence in that company, which enables businesses to invest in the company and the company to be successful and Vietnam to be more prosperous and so on, it brings much more meaning to their work. And I would encourage everybody to think more about purpose of their organisation and then to bring that into how you explain to people what they're doing and why it's important. And that's been far more powerful than the taglines or the mission statements. We've all run town halls where you go over and over the mission statement and then you walk out and you say to the staff, whoa, was that fun? Yeah, it was great. Well, what was that mission statement? Oh, okay. It wasn't so great. So I would encourage you to think about purpose.
So a quick one, whether with this vision, mission statement, strategy, purpose, so we think that, for example, if our tea lady does not know our objective in the medium term, that means our communication is poor. It has to transpire at every corner in the organization. Just one of the way to know whether we're getting it right or not. That it is not enough to have alignment in the management team that is falling into the cracks. There are two roadblocks, I think, to create challenges to make the message flowing down to our people. One is, of course, strategy change very often. The objective change very often in organization. And we have management changes at an insane pace. So how do you ensure that you cascade information to the people where plans to the staff when plans and people are very much frequently changing because the market changed so fast, because the geopolitical landscape changed so fast. So you need to have certain elements that are consistent, that are not changing. For example, value. For example, purpose. Other elements need to be agile, adjusted depending on the market landscape. But if you put on top of that frequent management changes, the cocktail become difficult because every manager, no matter what, has his or her own twist to the strategy. You hire somebody with a commercial profile, you talk about client. You hire somebody with a financial profile, you talk about risk and return. That's how they're designed. So I think perhaps a bit more focus on management or position stability. That people can think about assignment 3 to 5 years, other than 1 to 2 years, can certainly help to have certain consistency of message throughout.
Thank you. Thanks. John?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think that their vision, mission, value, part of the strategy from the companies, you should be able to deliver on your promises, on your strategy, and this message should be, like you were saying earlier, not forced, but get everyone on board and ownership all the way down to the bottom, right? Of course, it's not written in stone, but it is a part of the strategy, and everyone should be aware of it. We all know, sorry. But I would like to say that most people have got a nice vision, mission, and values, and they're ignored. They're totally ignored. They're nice words on the wall, unless the CEO, unless you guys and me are walking the talk, then it'll continue to be ignored, and that's all.
And I agree with you. So we need to, for example, once in a while do, how do we call it? Refreshment on the value session. What does it mean, what it does not mean? Also because we have new people, and new people need to be, of course, educated. One part I would like to challenge sometime is that there's a lot of expectation on the CEO that walk the talk. Of course, nothing wrong. But I would like sometime to see an equally share of responsibility and ownership from all the management team. It's not a solo play. It doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It's not a solo play. It's a we culture. And if it is a we culture, the top 12 manager of the organization for a size of 2,000 people and so on, they need to walk the talk. Not that if he or she doesn't do it, then nobody's doing it. Otherwise, we're back to school. And I think this mentality needs to be a little bit more modernized, so that is a we culture. We walk the talk, and then we equally share, of course, the honor to do it. Not that if he doesn't do it, then let it sleep.
Next,
okay. Just a bit more of a general question regarding organizational performance. Within my business, it's a fairly small business, and I can manage what we're doing internally. But from my customer's point of view, it's the whole supply chain that I have to look at the organizational performance. So it's not just what I do in my business, it's also what third-party operators, small businesses, international businesses do that compact on what happens to my end product. How can I, as a business leader, try and develop that relationship with the third-party organizations and third-party businesses that I have to work with, then to understand the same key requirements that we need, for instance, to supply the retailers in Europe, which I'm doing?
I'll have a go.
We do like this.
Marco's going to go. You can think, right? Yeah. I just don't think there's any substitute for talking, and you'd be surprised how open leaders of other businesses are when you say to them, hey, let's talk about my expectations of you, or Barrett troubles you're going to have meeting them, or can you meet them, or what I might need you to change in order to help me be successful, and so on. None of your counterparts doesn't want you to be successful, ultimately, right? It's like our dysfunctional employees at work. Nobody comes to the office thinking I'm going to try and screw up the company today and make it an awful day for everybody else. Same with your suppliers, same with people you're working with. So just reach out to them, and really human-centric approach is, I think, the best you can do beyond legal contractual terms and all those sorts of things. Yeah.
So sometimes we invite supplier in our office to educate them about our stance on compliance, for example. What is our tolerance for compliance and for facilitation payment and so on and so forth, bribes and so forth. There's one way to connect with them physically and explain them where we are coming from. Secondly, we call other providers to talk about responsible procurement. So what does it mean to source services from us? What does it mean to work with us? What is our standard procedure? But then we call other partners to thank them for their support. Different partner, different recipe. I align with your thoughts. We call them to our office. We do a session together, and we educate about our thought process. And we try to find more face-to-face alignment on how to run the business going forward.
Yeah, just to share a little story with you. When I first came to Vietnam, I actually worked in tourism. And at the time, if a big international company wanted to come into Vietnam, they had to go through a third party. So I set myself up as a third party, and we built this tourism company into something that was quite successful. It was one of the largest tourism companies in Vietnam at the time, because we essentially just had the big international tour companies coming through us. Vietnam became very popular. This was 20 years ago. Vietnam was becoming very popular. Lots of 5-star tour companies wanted to start entering the market, and Vietnam just wasn't a 5-star market. No matter what you did, you just couldn't deliver 5-star quality. I was in this game for about 3 years. I became extremely frustrated. It was my first company I'd ever owned. I was getting frustrated with all my third-party providers. I eventually got out, but it was exactly like Warrick said. If you want your service providers to instill the same level of service that you require, it's just dialogue and communication. So the guys who I eventually sold my company off to now, extremely successful company. They had a little bit of more pain threshold than I did at the time, and they just kept on working with those service providers, build them up to the level, and they now have an extremely successful inbound tourism company here in Vietnam.
Cool, thank you. They've given us 10 extra minutes of their time, and I don't want them to starve. So I have one last question for you guys. Unless you have a really, really burning question. Anybody? Ray, you had a chance, you get another one.
I've got no question, but for me, the whole thing, what we're discussing here, in both directions, from management to your employee and backwards, the core word for me is communication, communication, communication. And that would help all.
Thank you. Yeah. My last question for you is, if you guys were in the audience today wanting to ask a question to a panel like you, what question would you ask yourselves, or the panel?
I have one. I have one. I wanted to ask to the panel, how do you make sure, particularly for local talent, that we have so many in Vietnam, that if they land a job in an MNC in the senior management, this is a point of departure, not a point of arrival? How do you make sure that they have the empty stomach, that they don't feel already achieved or already advanced in their career? They keep that empty stomach that you had maybe 20 years ago when you started, and so that attitude of try new things, be entrepreneurial, make mistake, other than thinking, okay, now I'm here, it's a big MNC, all right, let me scale down from 5th gear to 3rd gear, other people will do the job. It's not going to work. So how do you click that one?
I think Warrick can answer that.
Oh, great! Thank you. Let me take some notes.
Thinking about some of your local partner promotions.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Always a loaded Ken. Yeah, I'm not going to answer. Not for free.
I will ask you for lunch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I'll go for lunch. I mean, I think if I was to answer the question around the, what we'd be asking, I think all of us have got to be super aware now of the external factors that are happening out there in the world, whether it's competitive or technological change in our industry or the geopolitics, and just understanding how those forces are going to impact our business and over the short and the medium and the long term, because so much we can control, but so much we can't control, but we have to respond, and I think that's all business leaders should be really thinking about that.
Wonderful.
I touched on in the video before. I think my question would be for you is, what's the number one big thing that you could do to make your organisation more productive? Okay, I have this real sense that in Vietnam we are running really fat organisations, and fat not in a good way fat. Okay, so if you really had to trim your organisation, where are you going to start?
Just one comment. I actually respectfully disagree with that statement, because we have a fairly good productivity in our organization, and there's a can-do attitude in Vietnam. File divided by head count is quite good comparing to other countries. So actually, I don't have that monkey on the shoulder, put it this way. So I was surprised to hear that observation, but I'm sure you know many more industries, many more companies. So you're
a logistic. In logistics, you need to know how to run. It's more competitive.
I don't know. I just want to share.
I think that I can understand what Gary's saying, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we've been, all of us running, or most of us, in a very high growth environments. And in high growth environments, you do recruit ahead of the curve. If you're smart, you have to, so that you've got the talent to deliver when the growth comes. And one of the things which has happened in 2020
with the COVID crisis is a lot of us have actually put the brakes on that hiring, and we've slowed it down. We perhaps haven't replaced people that have left. We've just got a bit more cautious about it. So I suspect what we might have been saying as we were coming out of 2019 into 2020 is, oh my God, we're fat. Stop saying, every time that's said, I feel like I'm spending more time at the gym. You know, gosh, we've got too many people for what's ahead. In fact, for a lot of us, the economy's been pretty good to us. The businesses have stayed on, largely thanks to Vietnam's economic environment. And I think a lot of organisations are probably going into 2021, I know we are, actually feeling a bit lean, because we did put the brakes on some of that hiring and expanding, and the market has continued to expand. But the good news is, I actually think in the lean years, when we are short of resource and business is tougher, everybody has to put in that bit of extra work to be successful. So we'll come out of it 2022, 23 even stronger and better, thanks to the pressure which is going to be on this year. That's what I feel in my organisation.
I think you touched on the key topic, hiring ahead of the curve. Easy to say, difficult to do. Because of course, if you're smart, you want to do it, you should. But then obviously you have always somebody at the top who is questioning why the costs are growing ahead of the possible GP coming. I have another question for the audience, by the way. How do you trigger entrepreneurship within the local workforce, being comfortable to take risk and drive own initiative? What is that magic sauce? I have a question to you. After we ask this question, somebody will answer, or we just have no, because otherwise we stand here.
Marco,
so we can go back, we eat, and then we hear the answers.
So you're the audience and then a panel now. Good question, good answer for that question. Building organizational entrepreneurship.
Interactive Q&A.
Interactive. Anyone have a good answer to that? Well, on that note. Did everyone hear the question?
Okay. Just to share what I've done with my team on that front, to answer Marco's questions, is that I gave them the responsibility on P&L. So each session had their own P&L, and they work within that. And actually, it takes a while. In my case, in some departments, take like 2 years to get used to it, because they are used to the model to come back and ask for approval, and I need extra, this and that. But eventually it worked, especially in sales. It worked very well. Yeah. Because they tend to ask for more stuff. And then, cannot justify, the result coming out and a lot of promotion, this and that. But when you give them that responsibility, they work on it actually. They work very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to let our speakers enjoy lunch. Can you please welcome me in thanking them with a big round of applause? Great job.